Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vip Vipperman, and I'm excited to be again in the studio with the Back in the Bold podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have entrepreneur Justin Dillon share with us a little bit about his journey as an entrepreneur, what he's been building, and where it's going now. So excited, Justin, to have you in the studio today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Justin, tell us a little bit about your backstory, man. How did you become an entrepreneur, as well as a little the early story too? How you grew up and how you started.
Okay, that's a big question. Look, I think entrepreneurship has just been part of my background. I come from a family that we all just kind of very middle class, lower middle class family. My dad was a used car salesman. He was always starting crazy businesses. So when you're a kid, that stuff is just really normal. My dad didn't have an office job or go to the same place every day. And I think that cadence of, of grind and making life happen out of nothing kind of was the backdrop for my life. My mom was a school teacher, so there was some stability there. But I just think that was just a part of. There was just businesses happening all the time, all around our house. Not many of which were amazing. Go anywhere. There was some pretty crazy ones, but I think that was just part of it. So doing something on my own, I think I might have had one job in my entire life. I was a busboy, and then I think I answered phones once at a telephone company. I think I was like some operator. I don't know what I was. Some type of like customer success at a phone technology company. Those are the only two jobs I've ever had. Everything for the rest of my life, I've always worked for myself. Created a bunch of businesses. But my background, I don't really think that I have a career. I think I have more of a path, and I'm not being cute. That's just how life worked. I went to college and thought I'd probably find a career in psychology, but I was also a musician, and soon thereafter got a record deal and started touring. And so I was a professional musician for years. Yeah, no, big dream. Yeah, big dream. And that really was the dream. Dream was not psychology. But again, being a musician, you're working for yourself. It's incredibly, I would say being an artist is an entrepreneurial journey. And throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to be an artist, an activist, and, a classic, startup entrepreneur. Reality is, they're all the same muscle groups. It's you start off with an idea of the world being different than the way you see it, whether you want to change the world through activism or through some type of campaigning, or you want to put something in the world that the world hasn't seen yet as an artist. So you see something that others don't. You start building things to show people what that world is, and you build a tribe around it, start walking towards it. Same muscle groups for artists, activists, and entrepreneurs. And so I find myself the least cool. Running a SaaS company is definitely not as cool as playing music, but it's got a lot of the same attributes and kind of muscle groups.
Well, and the one word I kept thinking as you were saying that was they all take incredible courage. To be an artist, you have to get on stage in front of thousands of people and share your work with the world. And it could go really, really badly. But you have to have the courage to step up there and to let people have it and to give them your all. And then activist, you've got you've got to have this passion for solving something and helping a group of people and get out there and tell people about it, no matter what they think about the result, but trying to convince them that, and again, as an entrepreneur, again, you're back on the stage again in a different type of stage, but selling a product, telling a story, they all involve getting in the ring and not backing down. So that's awesome.
Well, I'd say people smell conviction on you. Smell it on stage. They can tell if you believe in what you're singing, and if you love it, People can tell if you believe in the cause that you're fighting for or in the product that you've put out in the world. People can tell. And it's just an instinctual way of determining whether you can trust this person to move you or to sell you something in some way. If you don't have conviction, you're never going to have courage.
Nice, dude. That's a good soundbite. So, and it's something you believe. Like, that's a soundbite. It could be a bumper sticker, but I can tell that's something you believe, and
Oh,
that's awesome. So, someone comes out of college. They've had the life dream. I mean, some people dream to be a musician. They get a record deal. You're cruising along, enjoying being on stages, touring around countries. Why in the world would you become a SaaS entrepreneur after that?
well, I
Like,
didn't.
what is it that got you from band to activist to entrepreneur?
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. I didn't fall directly into running a SaaS supply chain intelligence company. Um, it. I was making a record in LA and read an article about human trafficking. I know that's a big part of what you guys focus on. Um, I read. I came across the issue like anyone else would. Just media and. Uh, it affected me in a way that was kind of frustrating from the standpoint of like, this is something I desperately want to have an impact on, but how am I supposed to touch this? Like, I think it created a deep sense of urgency without access.
Hmm.
And urgency without access is worse than never knowing. It's worse than apathy because it summons when we are called and we sense that we want to change something in the world, but we have no access, no way to do it that's palpable or easy. I think that's its own type of injustice. And a
Hmm.
lot of nonprofits traffic in this kind of injustice where they will show you something terrible and ask you for money, and that's great. But they're not really giving you access. They're just using a moment to pull money out. And I gave money. I did what I could, but I felt like that dissonance of urgency to action was something that I wanted to try to fix for this issue. And all I knew how to do was count to four and rhyme for a living. So I I decided to start where I
Hmm.
was. And while I was making a record, I'm like, I'm going to do something, like a charity concert or something big that everyone can get access to. And I won't go into the details, but that ended up becoming a motion picture rockumentary. It was a concert documentary on human trafficking that I produced and directed and brought in a lot of the great artists and politicians and celebrities and kind of built essentially a big benefit concert, but in movie theaters. And that became kind of my entrance into the space. Again, I was just a musician trying to help, but then I became a director of a movie and found myself becoming a spokesperson for this issue because the movie was in theaters all over the world. And so I kind of found my
Amazing.
way into it, kind of looked back over my shoulder, realized there was no music career to keep going on. I was definitely supposed to be somewhere in this space. And I've got just a long lingering imposter syndrome that's just become normalized in my life now. It's just not even, it's just part of the mix. You're always if I'm not an imposter, I don't feel comfortable with what I'm doing. And so I found myself as a spokesperson for the human trafficking movement. But my purpose was to give access to people to participate beyond just giving money. And so we got people to write letters to companies talking to them about slavery in their supply chains. And
Okay.
that was their way of instead of using their charitable dollars, use their, commercial dollars, the money they spend to run their lives and leverage that. That letter writing campaign caught the attention of the State Department. The State Department wanted to do something similar to carbon footprint. So we partnered with them and Google on this thing called Slavery Footprint, which helped consumers understand their connection to forced labor in the stuff they buy. That created a whole nother round of attention and an era of just spending a lot of time in DC and United Nations and just peak level imposter syndrome for me. And then I kind of sat around and looked at it and went, I don't know if this is really going to move the needle. Attention is great. It's a piece of the pie. But if it doesn't connect to action, it's probably not going to mean anything. And that led me to this incredibly nascent and boring space called supply chains. And my theory was, if we could bring visibility to supply chains, then we can maybe start to change this issue at scale. And that's when I started the SaaS company that's called Freedom, FRDM.
Man, what a journey. That's incredible. And again, you got on stages, you spoke to a lot of people, and you had a lot of people listening. But I love the comment that people listening doesn't actually cause them to do anything, to actually make a change. And I mean, yeah, they wrote letters, and yeah, they bought things from different companies. But even then, trying to get those companies to act and to make a difference in their supply chains, is such a big piece. So you see the problem. You need people to act, and you saw an issue area, which was supply chains. Can you talk a little bit about the problems in supply chains, just in case listeners don't know? And then I want to talk about what Freedom, like what you actually created to do.
Yeah, it's all built around the concept of unwillful complicity, which I wake up with every day. I'm unwillfully complicit in the exploitation of children and vulnerable people groups just through the things that I buy. 60% of the goods in my house are made with palm oil. Palm oil is a known commodity to be harvested with forced and child labor. All of my electronics have minerals that have no traceability to them, including mica, not just cobalt and tantalum and words we've never heard of on the periodic table. But these raw elements are being mined. I've seen this for myself in mines with children, and in some cases, in many cases, with exploitation. The cotton that I'm wearing today has a 60% chance of being sourced out of Western China, which most countries have denoted that part of the world as genocide and forced labor of a Muslim minority group. About 1 million to 2 million people being forced to pick tomatoes, harvest. So look, if our supply chains was one tier deep and we could look out our door and see what was happening in our lives, and we saw these things happening coming in, we stop it. We wouldn't buy it. There's no question. I haven't met anyone who wouldn't stop that. But that's the problem. You can't see it. And yet it's still happening. So this unwillful complicity, meaning that is not my values, and yet somehow the thing that I spend is contributing to it, is frustrating and disarming. And to be honest with you, companies feel the same way. However, every company that we work with deals with the same thing that I deal with every morning. I still have to run my life. Companies still have to run their businesses. Yeah. We can't go be the police of the world. So what can we do about our purchasing practices that can systematically make it difficult for people to exploit the poor and the weak? And the first step in that is transparency, understanding where things are coming from. And that's the number one thing that our technology does, is it helps our customers map their supply chain, at least mapping it geographically. And in some cases, mapping it to companies that have been known, sub-suppliers that have been known for using forced labor. That at minimum, achieving that, kicking the bad guys out that are known for being bad guys, kicking them out of the system through economics, that's a huge win. If we can do that, then the fear of you start putting fear in the supply chains and fear in the commercial space that, hey, if I use forced or child labor, I will no longer have a business. That's exactly the type of effect that we want to have. And it is a constant battle. It is not just a moral battle. It's an economic battle. The good news is, since we've started, when I started this journey in 2011, here in California where I live, a group of activists, of whom those letters that I was talking about supported, was able to get a law passed here in California under Governor Schwarzenegger, believe it or not, one of the last things he signed before he peaced out. And that is called the California Supply Chain Transparency Act. And it requires, if you're doing business in California, you have to have a statement. You'll see these on the bottom of companies' websites, what they're doing around transparency in supply chain. Since that time, 2011, there have been 22 other laws being passed, and more are in the way in places like the UK and Australia and Canada and EU. And now there are battles all around the world around what these laws are going to require businesses to do. That's just in, 15 years, 14 years. That's a very short amount of time to normalize supply chain transparency. So that's the world we live in now. So for anyone who's wanting to see change happen, settle in for 14 years. Stop looking for 14 minutes or 14 hours or 14 days. Buckle in. It's going to be boring. And it happens over time. And the world is looking to see if you've got the conviction or not. If you don't have the conviction, you will not convince anyone.
Bro, that's powerful, man. And it's something you've seen, like with your eyes, right? It's not something you're making up or something that you just, again, read in a book. This is what you've seen. It's that whole mantra of like, we overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. Like,
That's a great way to put
it just takes time to see real change happen. We're fortunate to we're living in a day with AI and some of that where technology is moving faster and people can respond quicker to things, right? Like when news happens, newsworthy events happen, you can know about it that day, right? Like you can see and know quicker. But to get people to move down that path of action and move down that path of changing company practices, it's just going to take time. So, can you talk a little bit about like momentum today? So you've waited that 14 years, you've been working that whole time. Where are we today that we weren't, when you got started in this space? You mentioned some laws. So we often talk about, these industries move when you have things like litigation, so lawsuits happening where people are forced to make decisions, legislation, states or countries making decisions like that, and then regulation, where because of litigation and legislation, regulations are being passed and companies are starting to take action to make decisions to actually change their practices. But can you talk about some of the companies maybe you've worked with and some of the things that you've actually seen take place?
Yeah, I will. First, I'll just say when I started the company, I actually went to some mentors of mine in Silicon Valley, some of whom worked at Excel Partners and others. Big VC firms had big exits. These folks were really generous in donating to the nonprofit that I was involved in. So it made sense for me just to go to them and say, hey, I've got this idea. What about building a supply chain transparency SaaS product that can help with this? And just amazing mentors in this space. And, the number one thing that came back with was people want to buy medicine. They don't want to buy vitamins. This sounds like a vitamin. That sounds like a good thing to do. It doesn't sound like something you have to take. And they weren't wrong then. There is no company that comes to freedom for any reason other than medicinal purposes, meaning I have a law or many laws that my company has to comply with. It requires me to look at my supply chain. It requires me to map my supply chain. It requires me to find risk in my supply chain. And if I find risk of forced or child labor, it requires me to do something demonstrative about it. And in some cases, if any child labor was found, there is a burden of duty of care, meaning I've got to repay that. That doesn't happen very often, but that's written in some of the laws, like in Canada. So these are the pains that companies come to us with, and we gladly we gladly help them with mapping their supply chain and working with their value chain, their partners, to do the same. So we have more of a network effect where we help them understand of all the 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 suppliers that a company might have, which ones have the greatest risk or prevalence of risk. forced labor somewhere in their supply chain, focus on those, get those moving in the right, those companies moving in the right direction, and then tracking that. And these companies are able to report year over year. Again, boring. Compliance, boring stuff. But supply chain compliance in our lifetime, the laws that have been written and that continue to be written and enforced and fought over, these are probably as great a laws or as important a laws as the Emancipation Proclamation.
Oh, wow.
When these laws are requiring, think about it, these laws are requiring companies, it's using market economics to be able to drive out injustice. So we're living in a time that we've never lived in before, which there are more laws on the books around the world requiring justice, requiring companies take care of this, and not blaming companies for it, but leveraging companies' buying power to be able to do it. So that whole concept around, can we leverage buying power? And when we thought about this back when we did a movie and get consumers, buying power really is the foil that you can use to be able to install injustice. And it takes a long time, and it's medicinal, and it's compliance. But over time, again, when we think about and project, 10 to 15 years from now, when I project out 3 years from now, I don't believe you as a company, any company, will be able to do business without supply chain transparency. And not just because of human rights issues, because of trade and tariff and geopolitical issues. Not knowing where your supply chain stretches into the world is now an operational risk. It's not just a moral hazard. It is an operational risk. And that is a benefit to those who are working on things like climate change and human rights, because in order to fix those things, you need visibility. And the driver for supply chain visibility goes beyond just human rights due diligence. It falls into, is my supply chain somehow finding its way through Taiwan or Ukraine or Russia, where this is going to create a knock-on effect when it comes to operations. And we've all seen that this year around tariffs. We certainly saw it during the pandemic. So supply chain visibility is now a value add, not just a nice to have.
Nice. No, that's probably. Talk to me. One of the things you mentioned was not condemning the companies who are having the problems, but trying to lift them up and effectively like redeeming the issues. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like your software. So if you go in and a company says, I've got this pain point, there's a law passed now in my state or in my country, and I've got to take action on this. And they suddenly discover that they've got a huge problem. Are you taking that immediately to the Wall Street Journal and saying like, so-and-so company is doing this terrible thing? Or are you guys going, hey, we have a problem. How can we like help you guys to fix it? And then where do we go?
We're not investigative journalists. That's not our job. We see terrible things in supply chains every day, through no fault of our customers doing. And I think it's wildly arrogant to do anything like that. I think it's wildly arrogant to point fingers. Because as I mentioned, you and me, everyone at Eagle wakes up every day and are unwillfully complicit.
Yeah.
We are. We're using things made with slavery to try to fight slavery. I mean, just be honest, right?
Yeah.
So this idea that we can throw rocks at glass houses or glass buildings is just like, okay, that maybe have worked in the 90s or early 2000s. It doesn't work anymore. One, because people forget immediately. That's not the tactic to take. And really, a better tactic is, how can we operate better in the world? That's a story that everyone is interested in. And flourishing and is a better story than being able to, ouster someone. And we've all seen that it feels really good to find someone doing something bad. But I think we really need to check in with ourselves. Why? Why are we so happy to catch someone with slavery? I think we need to check our own hearts on that kind of stuff. As far as I'm concerned, I think that a better way, and I'm not saying there aren't companies that are absolutely complicit, not unwillfully, intentionally complicit. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there aren't. There's plenty of those out there. But a better way to build something much bigger is to be able to move towards flourishing And flourishing is about being able to reduce risk so that you can take risks. That is an economic principle. We have insurance so that we can take a risk driving our car every day, which is a risk. So the idea of reducing risk in supply chains so that companies can take risks and grow and flourish is a much better story than you're bad because somewhere in your supply chain you didn't see something. I just don't think that's a story that sticks or that people really listen to.
Dude, I love it. Yes. So excited about just the redemptive angle, right?
Mm,
Like the goal being let's help fix the problems and work with you to make them better. Um, and not poo-poo you or point fingers and stuff like
sure.
that because you made a mistake,
Yeah.
especially if you didn't know that you were making the mistake. Obviously, litigation exists for those places where people intentionally made mistakes and, cause significant harm. But excited to be in a place where we're truly forging human flourishing. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like you have a passion for that.
And no one wants to be told what to do. So just this week, Reuters announced that the country of Qatar is threatening to cut off liquid gas to Europe, which it provides about 13% of the natural or liquid gas to Europe. The country of Qatar is threatening to cut it off unless they lighten the severity. European Union has a bill called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Boy, we come up with some great names, don't we? Everything has to be turned into an acronym, which is almost a word. So CSDDD. And it's requiring companies to do severe, intense human rights and climate due diligence. And it's punitive. It's being beat up in Parliament to try to drive this law to become a less severe, and it already is a shadow of its first version. But we're now seeing the saber rattling of countries saying, if you pass that law, we will cut off your gas. So think about that. A country is saying, which by the way, Qatar, hosted the World Cup, um, uh, huge forced labor infractions for the building of that, bringing in migrant laborers, and people dying and all the rest of it. Just clearly an infraction. So nothing against Qatar, but like not a super great moral ground to stand on when it comes to this, saying, hey, this is about business, not about people. If you make this hard on us, we're going to make it hard on you. It's the first time we've seen that. So this is a battle. But if you take the stance of I'm better than you and I'm going to point fingers and make this hard for you, you're going to get pushback. And in the world we're living in right now, you will get pushback. So you need to find a way. This needs to be, in order to drive transparency and justice in supply chains, you need to do it with people, not against people. And I find the ways in which some groups, even some parties, some countries have handled these laws, it becomes from an arrogant standpoint of we're better than you. We have a moral high ground. I think we all just need to cut the crap on that. None of us have any ground to stand on. We all wake up unwillfully complicit and we need to move the world forward.
Man, no, appreciate that. And love how active you are and keeping an eye on what's happening in the world. As far as an entrepreneur, sometimes as an entrepreneur, you get lost in the minutia of building the technology or growing the things. But because of what you do, you're probably one of the most active, news-focused entrepreneurs that I know, which is awesome. Talk to me a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey. Give me maybe 2 or 3 lessons you've learned as you've gone from, band and musician to activist and, building movies to now B2B SaaS, entrepreneur. What are a couple of lessons as you've, built a team and sold technology and worked with, Fortune 500 companies that you've learned?
I'll just give you 2 lessons. First lesson is listen to the feet, not the mouth. When you're raising money and a venture capitalist gives you a reason why they're not going to invest, don't listen to what they're saying. Just realize that they're walking away and let it go. When you're building something you're passionate about, your heart's in it. And you can be affected you are affected by denial every day. And I wake up every day. I don't try to avoid disappointment. I expect it. It comes every single day. There is a disappointment. So great advancements, not every day, but on some days. And that's the craziness about entrepreneurs. And really only it's very, less than a third of the people in the world. There's a kind of a factoid going around that there's, only about a third in the world people in the world can be entrepreneurs, meaning I want to subject myself to this kind of craziness.
Yeah.
Those that are know how to face rejection and have skills inside that do this. They're not dead inside. We know of some entrepreneurs that truly are dead inside that we laud and praise. Most of us are not dead inside. We actually have a beating human heart that is affected with rejection. And the way that I deal with rejection is just listen or help deal with rejection is listen to the feet, not the words. People are going to tell you why they do something. It's not always true. It's just, to me, it's just hand waving. They might be direct. I think people try to be helpful when they reject. I don't think that's helpful. It's like someone breaking up with someone. It's like, let me tell you why I'm breaking up. It doesn't matter. You're breaking up with me. Like it's not. I don't need your perspective on me while you're walking away. So just listen to the feet, not the words. That's the first thing. The second one is believe when you don't believe. You don't wake this idea that entrepreneurs wake up every day with no. We wake up every day with fear and consternation because we're dancing on the edge of a cliff. And that you do build up muscle groups and strength. It's kind of crazy. If anyone who's ever done strength training, like you start off and you're like, I can't even lift this weight. And then 6 months later, you're like, I don't even touch that weight anymore. I'm dead. Like,
right.
It's weird how you do build up muscle strength, but you're still dancing on the edge of a cliff. And in order to keep moving, you just have to believe some days when you just don't believe, which means that you force yourself out of your feelings and just into something much deeper called conviction. So you believe in what you're doing, even though everything around you is telling you don't believe this. Make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I understand that. Man. No, dude, that's great. Thank you for those lessons. I think for any of the entrepreneurs out there, those two things in particular are something to grow in, to learn on. And it's like you said, you don't necessarily wake up one day and automatically have those things, but maybe you might be more inclined to go in that direction than, two of the other three people that you talk with. Yeah, that's awesome. So, talk to me about this world that we're in. You mentioned legislation has begun. You mentioned some companies are starting to use the types of products you have, and that other folks are having. If you look 10 more years into the future, what do you think, based on the momentum that's happening now? What do you think we're going in this space? And what do you think companies are going to be expected to do and to know?
Well, I try not to speak or act out of my bias. It's difficult to do that. So I say this with recognizing that I'm an entrepreneur running a SaaS company that does supply chain transparency, and obviously I'm quite biased towards that's the world that I want to see.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective. That one of the things we talk about at Freedom is, are we listening to the screaming data? The screaming data is the data that is just like super loud in our face, but we're not necessarily listening to it. And it's the stuff that we miss that's obvious because you're so inside of your own confirmation bias.
Interesting.
The screaming data that we're seeing coming in is one of the places that we can read it as this very distilled data about where the world's going is through RFPs, requests for proposals. So big companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, invite us in to pitch with lots of other software providers to help them with their supply chain transformation. There's lots of words they'll use for it. And in every one of those, they have a very long view. In other words, they have these RFPs are kind of designed such that they're looking at a 5 to 10 year journey. Journey is a big word.
Yeah.
So the primary data that we're seeing is companies and governments are now seeing that supply chain transparency and using transparency and visibility as a way to be able to drive systemic change in the supply chains is now not a concept that we as a company need to educate people on. So you're not selling a vitamin anymore when you don't have to explain to people what it is that you're doing. You're
Right.
moving to medicinal, right? That's
Gotcha.
that kind of. And most companies start off as a vitamin, and no matter what they're doing, they're just kind of an elective, right? And if you're fortunate enough, you move into being medicinal. So we're seeing companies looking at this through I need to buy this. I should probably have one of these things. To, oh no, this is going to be a part of our standard operating procedure. So much so that the U.S. federal government just awarded something. There was an award that just went out to a lot of different federal contractors. We got to have a peek at it. We're not in it, but because we don't work in that space. But the U.S. government has a $2 billion supply chain illumination project that they're going, and they just awarded the first $900 million of that. $900 million into our space.
Wow.
So that's
confirmation that you're in the right place.
medicinal, and they're not alone. The UK government's working at their own procurement. Australia. So yeah, I think we're moving into a new normal. The hope is that this isn't just a compliance exercise where you just check the box and move on. We've done that in the United States before. We've all heard of conflict minerals. There's been the Dodd-Frank Act was passed, I think, in 2008 or quite a long time ago around conflict minerals. It's locked in. Everyone, most companies have a conflict minerals statement. There's still challenges around conflict, right? So this idea that you pass an act, you set a budget, and it's over. I think this will never be over, and it's only going to be diminished as much as we as governments and companies have the conviction that we need to keep going and getting better every year on this.
Nice. So, question for you. So, you talk about those RFPs. You talk about $900 million coming into the space, and that's just in the U.S. government money, right? So, that would mean that other entrepreneurs are going, wow, there's money here to be made. There's an opportunity that we didn't see. We want to jump into this space. When you win those proposals, like company asks for RFPs, you win. Why did you win over 100 other companies that are out there? What do the companies normally see about freedom that they didn't see in somebody else? Because I imagine anybody can look at the laws and kind of know, and anybody could look at a shipment coming out of Africa or Europe or the U.S. What is it? What is it that you guys uniquely do that wins?
Again, I have to say I've got bias here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think with any company, it's going back to people can smell conviction. Our conviction here isn't just about seeing an opportunity making money, which we obviously do and obviously are. That is a piece of this. But I think if that's all you're trying to do as a company, it's really evident. And your product might be great, but people can smell conviction. If your conviction is, how do I just become as rich and gather as much as the market as possible? That is how you will be seen. And you have to, and maybe that works. I know it does work. Does it work in the long run? I'm not entirely sure. What companies see in us is that our conviction isn't just to find problems. See, I already learned that. I already learned that it's not enough just to tell 100 million consumers around the world about slavery, which we did. If you don't have a conviction to fix it, it's all you've done is illuminate problems, and you've created kind of more of a mess.
Yeah.
We as a company are a supply chain illumination and management company, risk management, which means that we've built tools to fix it. We're not done until we've given the company everything that they can to fix this problem. And that's really where companies are struggling. They actually don't know what to do, because here's the deal. You don't control your entire supply chain. You control your direct suppliers. That's it. And you barely control that. So there is a lot of tension with companies that are buying software like ours. Like, I can know a bunch about my suppliers, but how much I can influence them is really limited to how much of their business. If I'm only 0.03% of their business, they're probably not going to listen to me. And that's true. And that's difficult when you're buying from someone that has real challenges and you've made them aware of that. So we live in that. Our technology lives in that tension of where can we optimize? We call it optimizing oversight. Where are the areas where you can have the most impact? And how do we just double down on those and give you tools in which you can fix that? So I think that's for companies that really want to do something,
Right.
We're going to be the best option. From the standpoint of, that sounds really confident, and it truly is. I truly believe there's my conviction. We're the ones that are going to fix it. And we're not, and this is what we stay up at night trying to figure out, because that's why I started the company. I didn't start the company to tell the world, guess what? There's a bunch of problems in the world. Started the company to help companies fix it. That's what I believe in. And I think that's the conviction that our customers can smell.
And because when you fix it, there's a life that's transformed at the end, right? There's a person that's not digging metal out of the ground or pulling cotton off from a plant with their bare hands for no money and without any hope of their life ever changing. And
You'll never know who those people are. You'll never know. You'll never, it's just like when you give money, you don't know where it's going. You don't watch and see that. You have to just believe that the thing you're putting into the world is making it harder to do bad things to people now or in the future. And that has to be enough. That has to be enough. And that's part of our job with helping companies understand this. We get behind companies and applaud them, get excited for them because, like, look, you're making it harder to do bad things for people now and in the future. That is laudable. That is incredible. Also, I believe in a world where when you do these things, good things come back to you. You are, whether you call it, blessing or whatever you want to call it, like when your company is operating better, just better. And this is the thing that people don't understand. Oh my God, if I start chasing human rights in my supply chain, it's going to cost me. That is garbage. Absolutely untrue. Because it's not your job to fix it. It's your job to prevent it. And prevention is very, very cheap. Fixing it is very expensive and never ending. But creating a supply chain that is in line with the values that are on your website, that is actually very cheap. And that comes back in ROI over time. And there's tons of studies that have proven that companies that invest in supply chain due diligence actually get a higher rate of return and a higher share price over time. How you track it, don't wrestle with me. I'll just send you some Wall Street Journal articles. But this has been proven to be true. So it's just the delusion that if I can do something good, something bad happens to me. That's garbage. It's not true.
Dude, thank you. All right. So somebody's heard the podcast. They're a listener today. Watch one of your clips. What do they do to take action? How do they get involved? Give us some, whether it's your website, a couple next steps. I think Slavery Footprint is even out there still today. So just give us some thoughts about how a person can now take action on what they've heard over the last few minutes.
Well, our prices are in the 5 figures. So unless you want to buy 5 and 6 figures. So unless you, for some reason, want to buy enterprise software for yourself, which I don't recommend.
So if someone is listening and they're in an enterprise software business, they go to FRDM.ai, right?
Yeah, you just go to the website, you get in. There's lots of ways in to buy the software and get started. And we really are building a community around this. So it is you'll be brought into something that's it's got some brands that you would recognize, like Coca-Cola and Accenture and others. There's a great community of companies that are going in this direction. That's if you're a company. If you're a consumer, I think the only way that you can really, really do something, if this is a deep conviction of yours, is just to raise your voice. But don't be judgmental. Ask companies directly, what are they doing around supply chain transparency? And don't accept a hand-wavy answer. If they're not digging into their supply chain and doing full supply chain visibility, they're probably not as advanced as they need to be, and they need your encouragement as a consumer. This works. Consumers who are concerned about this, when you hear these types of things, they don't feel connected to you. They're absolutely connected to consumers. Also, you might want to pay attention of who you are buying from. And I know it's fast and cheap. And by the way, not all fast fashion is bad, but there are some that are particularly not paying attention. And you as a consumer can dig in a little bit and see what's going on there. And that's one area where you as yourself can go, hey, if this company can't go public because of these issues, maybe I shouldn't buy from them.
I appreciate it. And then finally, really quick, give me some info about your podcast. So if someone wants to dive into these issues a little bit more, hear a little bit more what's happening in the world about supply chains, share with me a little bit about that.
Well, our podcast is going to be really boring. Yeah, that's my sell. Like,
yeah.
It's the worst thing I've ever named in my life. And I take great pride in naming companies and songs and movies. And this is the worst name I've ever come up with, the Responsible Supply Chain Show. It couldn't be more on point. I have a really tough relationship with trying to be clever, and I wasn't allowed to be clever here. I had to say exactly what it was, leave no room. So if you're interested in like super nerdy talk about how supply chains work, by all means, listen to it. We try to make it interesting for everyone, but we do not hide the fact that this is designed for people working or are interested in supply chains.
Awesome. Hey, somebody's needs to be doing that, and I'm appreciative that you're doing it and you're bringing in the experts in the space to talk to you about it. So thank you for doing that. Awesome. Yeah. Hey, Justin, it's been a joy. I've been following your journey for years and years now, ever since you pitched an event I was part of years ago. And so I'm so excited to see the growth of the company, the momentum that you guys are having in the space, and just the impact that you guys have had over these years. So thanks for continuing to follow your convictions. Not everybody does. And we're really thankful you're doing it, and you're setting a good example for us. So keep after it, buddy.
Thank you. And thank you for working so hard to make everyone better. You guys are known in the world as making people better. And that's the best kind of human you can be. So thank you so much for having me.